take me back to 2023. This all, and if you want to jump in with us, you tell me. But 2023, the Rainbowland controversy kind of happens.
Mm-hmm.
Just in your own words, I guess, if you want to re-explain kind of what happened there.
Like from how long do you want me to do?
I guess
Give it the Cliff's Notes
Okay.
version.
short version. Yeah, in
Okay.
your own words, what happened?
Well, the district was creating these really strict policies that we're seeing a lot more now, but back in 2023, we were only seeing policies, for example, like against having signage with rainbows and policies that said you can't ask students their pronouns or honor the names that they ask you to use with them. And we were seeing the school board create some really like policies that were very much against what seemed to be very much about the LGBTQ community and students that might identify it as part of that community. And so when that started happening, there were parents and community members that got really upset about that, as they should be. And one of the teachers the year before before I tweeted about the song was suspended without pay for refusing to take a rainbow flag down from her classroom. And we were told we couldn't have signs that said like, all are welcome here, like, diversity, stuff like that. We weren't allowed to have a sign that said anti-racist classroom, which was the one that really freaked me out. Because I taught dual language, so a lot of my students were from diverse backgrounds and diverse nationalities and multilingual and all that kind of stuff. But when we were practicing the school program and they said that we couldn't sing the Rainbowland song, my tweet went viral. And, when I was asked about it later, I told the media and anybody who asked me that all of the history about their really anti-LGBTQ policies. And so, yeah, and I was fired.
And you were fired, and one of the things that has been brought up in the case is that you have all these job offers, or there was all this opportunity after you were fired. Has that been true?
That is like, I don't know where they got that information. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are.
Why don't you answer that? Yeah.
It's 2 years later and you're still looking.
I think what we could say is Melissa's heart is in teaching, and if there had been a teaching opportunity, I think it's fair to say you would have taken it. And so the fact that she's not in the classroom is indicative of the fact that she has not been able to find a teaching position.
And that's, I don't know what the right word, has this literally, is this like the black mark against you that no district wants to talk to you since you've done this?
Hard to say.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And I think I can say this, that my resume and my all of my preparation, my cover letter is like fantastic and way better than it was when I was hired in Waukesha. I mean, I worked with somebody to really like fine tune everything because I wanted to make sure I crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's, and I did a lot of, reaching out and following up after applications. So.
Have you even gotten a callback?
I've gotten callbacks, but nothing ever came up of the jobs.
Do they ask you about the?
No, not. Well, I haven't gotten a callback for over a year. So, but in the beginning, I don't even remember. There were only a few, but also the public school districts is what I really like. I really am invested and have always been a public school teacher, and so, people say like, oh, you could just teach here or there, but it's like, well, I really am committed to being in public school, and so that's been really hard. I don't want to work in a place where not every child can be there, or they don't provide the same kinds of public services as you get in a public school. So,
okay, I was curious if they bring that. If they're like, oh, you did this. Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I think they usually don't. They just don't. Yeah, not that I can remember.
So obviously the this, I know, I do it all the time. I move in front of his own shot. I block you guys from the shot. So obviously this happened, and now you guys are in the, well, I guess let's talk legal, or in the legal process. And maybe this is a summer question. I guess kind of walk us through, a lawsuit has been filed, where we are, what this looks like.
Sure. So we filed Melissa's First Amendment retaliation case on September 5th of 2023, and it goes through sort of a standard civil litigation life cycle. So we have spent the last 18 months going through discovery. That's where the parties exchange documents and take depositions and prepare their cases, right? Get all of the facts and evidence that they need to put forward their arguments to file for summary judgment. So we have filed for summary judgment. Both sides have filed a summary judgment motion that's called cross summary judgment, and that was filed on February 21st. Then each side will reply to the other side's brief, and those briefs are due in a week or so. And then each side will reply again, and those briefs are due in mid-April. So what we would say is that summary judgment briefing will be concluded by mid-April, and then it's in the court's hands. The court will review all of the documents that have been submitted by both sides and issue a decision on summary judgment.
So in theory, if the court, we didn't know how long the length of time the court would take, but in theory, the case could be decided as soon as next month?
I would say no, because if briefing doesn't close until mid-April.
Oh, so they won't brief and then like come up back with a summary judgment answer right away?
No. Usually, this is a document-intensive case. There's a lot of information, right? It took us 18 months to get all of the facts and evidence, and so the court will do its due diligence and review everybody's information, all of the documents that were submitted, the briefs that were submitted, and then will issue a written decision is the most common outcome. It would be impossible for me to predict, but I would not say that it would be within the month of our finalized briefing. It takes a while to go through all of the arguments and all of the documents.
Okay.
Summary judgment can yield a lot of different results, right? You can win a partial summary judgment. You can lose summary judgment. One side could lose. The other side could lose. So there's a lot of different options that the court has at this point. Summary judgment is the part of the case where the parties submit that there's no dispute over the facts. Mm-hmm. If the court doesn't agree, then you go to a jury trial, and the jury's job is to decide who's more credible on those facts. So there's certainly a possibility that the case survives, or there's a partial summary judgment decision, and then trial would be scheduled.
Okay. I guess, like, let's go back to, why do you think Melissa's First Amendment rights were violated?
Sure. So let's just talk kind of more broadly about a First Amendment claim, right? When we think about the First Amendment, we are talking about a restriction on government, right? So it prevents the government from penalizing people, citizens, for speaking out. I'll start by saying, like, as a threshold matter, the First Amendment doesn't apply to private citizens who are working for private companies, right? Mm-hmm. The First Amendment only operates to allow free speech claims for public employees. If you are a public employee and you are speaking on a matter of public concern as a private citizen, so not in your official job duties, but you're just speaking as a private citizen, then the First Amendment operates to protect you from retaliation from your employer, in this case, for Melissa, and you are entitled under the First Amendment to speak about matters of public concern as a private employee. In a First Amendment case, then, the next question is what we call like a Pickering balancing test, where that's a reference to the case where the balancing test was established. So the next step is then to analyze whether the person's interest in the speech is balanced against the district's interest or the government employer's interest in running their business effectively, or sort of carrying out the governmental duties that they are tasked with doing. So broadly speaking, Melissa was speaking as a private citizen, not in her capacity as a first grade teacher, on a matter of public concern. And as the briefing shows in our analysis on the balancing, we think the balance weighs in her favor.
And I guess the question, and probably a lot of people say like, well, I can't do this in my job, so why should she be allowed to do it in her job?
Well, it wasn't in her job. That's the first point, right? Like she was speaking on her own private time. It was her own personal Twitter account. That's one thing. But you're right. If she did not work for a public employer, the public employer would, or the private employer has a right to terminate anybody they want. Wisconsin is an at-will employment state. So that means if she had worked for a company that wasn't a public entity, they could have terminated her and she would not have had a First Amendment claim. The First Amendment, right, the idea behind the First Amendment is that we want our public employees to be able to engage and share information about what our government is doing. That's the impetus behind the First Amendment. And so we treat First Amendment, we treat public employees a little bit differently than we treat private employees because they have a constitutional right to engage in free speech. And we, as a society, right, want our public employees to be able to do that.
And I guess I don't know, how often are teachers really the subject of a First Amendment case like this?
Well, there's a lot of case law out there about public school teachers. So, you know, it is certainly an area of First Amendment litigation. And it's something that, you know, it would be hard for me to sort of say like how often.
Yeah.
I think there are lots of cases involving public school teachers who assert that their First Amendment rights have been violated.
Okay, because I would say some of the people have said, you know, this is really a unique case. Melissa's a unique case. This doesn't really happen that often. Would you say that people maybe don't understand it does happen more than they realize?
I would say that there are. It's hard for me to answer that question, right? Because there are people who are terminated from public employment and don't pursue litigation and maybe could.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who maybe don't speak out because they're afraid of being terminated. So I certainly think that Melissa's situation, because it was national and it went viral, I mean, not all First Amendment cases are like that, right? Mm-hmm. Not all First Amendment cases have the national coverage that Melissa's did. But it doesn't have to be national coverage for the First Amendment to apply. There are lots of situations that are more localized where someone could still have First Amendment protection for their speech.
Okay. And I guess...
Can I add something
sure,
to that?
go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I think I found myself a lot of times as a teacher being extremely frustrated and feeling like things weren't right. And a lot of teachers, I do feel like they're nervous about speaking out because they don't want to lose their jobs, or they're afraid, or their principals or administration say like, oh, keep the, matters in the school building. And I think that that's really dangerous because as someone who also lives in the community where you work a lot of times and cares about children, I would think that all citizens would want to know what's going on in the schools. And if we are being told as teachers that we're not allowed to speak out, then imagine what kinds of things won't be discovered and won't be found out. And those are our children that we're talking about. So it was extremely frustrating a lot of times when I wanted to make, people aware of things in the past and wasn't able to get anyone to listen to me. So I think it's kind of interesting that I accidentally tweeted something viral when there were many times when I wished that I could have gotten, people to notice some of the things that were happening in various school districts where I worked.
And I was going to ask you, it has been 2 years, and there's definitely been a shift in how people feel about speaking out, and there's been a shift in just politics in general. Mm-hmm. If you could do it all over again, would you?
Yeah, I definitely would, and I would encourage people now to not be afraid to speak out because Even though I was really surprised that I'm not teaching anymore. I was really surprised that I wasn't able to, get a big response as far as, I got a lot of vocal support from people saying like, wow, it's like so amazing, thank you so much, or that I couldn't do what you were able to do. And it gives me pause because I think of the kids and the facts of research that we know about kids' mental health right now, their anxiety, their comfort level at school, the different kinds of horrible, violent things that are happening in school. And I wonder, like, what is stopping people from speaking out about those things and some of the solutions that we might know as educators, because we definitely see a shift in all of that. And it's, again, like our kids, and I would want someone to do the same for me if they knew something was happening in my child's school. And so regardless of, the identity of the students that I'm teaching with or their national origin or the language they speak, like I'm going to speak out on their behalf because they're children and I care about people in general. And I think most teachers do. So I want teachers and anyone in the public to really just like exercise their First Amendment rights right now. It's been really frustrating seeing the lack of that, especially when people that don't agree with me, for example, feel so emboldened to make really horrible comments about all kinds of things that we know are not productive and don't have the best interests of each other in mind.